Hola, en este vídeo vamos a hablar sobre la diferencia entre la voz activa y la voz pasiva. In general, the active voice is used commonly in language when we want to emphasize a subject or a person doing the action and the action itself or the thing itself. The passive voice is used in general to emphasize the thing or the object and not the person doing the action. So it's used when we don't really want to mention, because it's not relevant, for example, the person doing the action. So the active voice needs three elements to work in order to make it passive. First of all, we need a subject. So in Spanish and in English, the person doing the action would be the subject. Then this is what we call the verb, so it's a doing thing, and this is the direct object. So when we translate this into Spanish, los leones would be the subject, comen would be they eat, the verb, and carne would be the direct object. Now, remember that in Spanish, you always need to use the article at the beginning of sentences. So when you refer to the subject, you will say, for example, if you want to say students are welcomed, you will always say los estudiantes son bienvenidos, for example. So in order to form the passive voice, we're going to follow a very, very simple rule. So follow this, cross, and down. So the direct object is going to become the subject. So in English it would be meat, and in Spanish we always need to use the article, so la carne. Then you would say in English is eaten, and you would finish that with the agent, which is optional. The passive voice is commonly used in newspaper, for example. So meat is eaten by lions. How do we translate by lions in Spanish? Por, and remember the article, los leones. So subject becomes the agent, object becomes the subject, and is eaten. In order to form this, remember this is the whichever tense that we use. So is in Spanish would be es, and this is the past participle of the verb. In regular verbs it usually finishes in, so it always finishes in ed. In irregular verbs would be the past participle. So in the case of to buy, it would be bought. In the case of play, it would be played, for example. So la carne es. Now in Spanish you always use the the participle as well. So la carne es, the participle is always the ido ida form of the verb. So es comida. Now why do I say comida? Is because it's la carne, feminine. So it needs to agree with the subject. Let's go to this example. A child broke the window at 5 o'clock. The general rule that we're going to follow is, so a child, un niño, would be the subject, rompió would be the verb, la ventana would be the direct object, and now at 5 o'clock is extra stuff that we're going to call a complement, which is always optional, and therefore we're always going to keep on the same place as we found it. So imagine I say, yesterday a child broke the window at 5 o'clock. In order to form the passive voice, you would still say yesterday, and then you would keep it at 5 o'clock in the same place. Now remember our rule. The direct object becomes a subject, the subject becomes the agent, and the verb stays on the same place. So, a child broke the window. The window was broken by a child. Let's translate this into Spanish. The window, la ventana, by a child, por un niño, o un chico, and was broken. Now, what tense is it? Is it present, past, or future? Present. So we're going to use the preterite, fue. Why do I say fue? It's because la ventana is it was, right? So la ventana, third person singular, fue. Now, this verb is an irregular verb. So technically, if the verb is romper, in Spanish, technically we would cross the ER form and then we would add ido or ida. In this case, ida, because la ventana is a feminine thing. However, this is an irregular verb and the past participle would be rota. Rota. La ventana fue rota por un niño. Now, the passive voice is not used in Spanish as commonly as in English. What we use instead is the impersonal se. So what is impersonal se? The impersonal se refers to somebody. So, for example, if we want to say lions eat meat, or meat is eaten, or English is spoken here, and you don't really want to say who, you would just use the impersonal se. Now, extremely easy, and the most common way of talking about the passive voice in Spanish. Meat is eaten by lions. All you need to do is to write se and use the verb in whichever tense the passive voice is telling you, or whichever. So in this case, it would be the present tense. To eat is comer. So if you want to say he or she eats, you would say come. So in order to form the impersonal se in Spanish, the rule is you write the se and you put the verb on the third person, singular or plural. In this case, obviously, we refer to the singular form. So if we go to the example of a child broke the window, deadly easy. Un niño rompió la ventana. All you need to do to say the window broke, the window, la ventana, broke or was broken, you would just say se, so la ventana, se, and then you would just keep the verb on the tense that you find it, rompió. La ventana se rompió. Imagine we're talking about a child broke some pencils. El niño rompió los lápices. Now, if we want to put it on the impersonal se, los lápices, plural, becomes a subject. So we would say los lápices se. Because this is plural, you need to keep the verb in the same tense, so the preterite, but on the they form. Rompieron.